pressure. Look out for reactant.
Hello everyone, this is Big Sam here, and today I'm back with another Warframe video. It's been a little bit of a long time, nearly 2 months since the last video, and I appreciate your support on that one. If you haven't seen it, I suggest you go see him. It was a video about Ash and how I built him to basically one-shot anything in level cap, how to get billions upon billions of damage using his shadow clones, and it's really good. I suggest you go watch it for yourself. And without further ado, let's jump right in. Today's guest is Saryn. She is a really good Warframe, a really good weapons platform, right? But then at the same time, at least to me, she's much more of a glass cannon. And so without further ado, let's jump into her abilities. We start with the passive, which is pretty basic. Status effects that you inflict last 25% longer, so it's basically a second and a half longer. Instead of 6 seconds, it lasts for 7.5 seconds. So her first ability, we got Spores. What Spores does is you spread some spores onto the enemy that you're targeting, and if you kill the enemy or shoot the physical spores that appear on their body, basically you blow up the bubble, all the spores get out, they seek the nearest enemy, and they latch into it, infecting them and keeping the cycle going. And it increases in damage the more enemies you infect, and it also is our means of stripping armor, because this ability deals corrosive damage and procs corrosive stats, and there is an augment for it. If you hold the ability, you add an extra corrosive damage buff to your weapon, which is really good, and it is the first part of our weapon specialist Saryn here. You know, the infamous Saryn with a Sobek or Saryn with an Auguras. But there's another one that isn't as known as those, and I'll explain it to you. But now, let's go up to our second ability, which is to me, it's a pretty good ability for moving around. Because what you do is, when you cast it, Saryn molts that tricks enemies into attacking it, much more like a Loki's decoy. But it's not as high in the ranking of things that would steal enemy aggression from you to keep you safe. And it's also not that strong. It can basically get one shot at higher levels. But again, it gives you a boost of movement speed so you can get the hell out of there, right? Which is her ult. I'm not even gonna talk about her ultimate ability or her 4 because it's completely useless. It basically, what it does is, and I know I segued a little bit, but what it does is it turns all the toxin damage that all the toxin status around into viral. If I recall correctly, I haven't really used it in forever, and it's kind of weak because you need those toxic procs, you know? So we hit on to our third ability, Toxic Lash. What it does basically adds a second instance of damage that is pure toxin. This ability would have double the strength on a melee, so it starts at 30% extra damage on all your weapons. On a melee, it's a 60%. So a good thing about this ability is that, again, it does a second instance. That's why when we use a Sobek, enemies have like that chain reaction, everybody blowing up, because what it does is it also procs again off of Sobek's acid shells explosion. And I'll show you how I personally utilize it for something other than a Sobek, because again, Saryn and Sobek, if you haven't heard of that, or if you haven't tried that, you've probably been living under a rock, or you're just new to Warframe. So, with her ult being super irrelevant, we removed it in favor of one of the two. I prefer Nourish, and the other one is Roar. If you can manage your energy, you can go ahead and use Roar, and Roar is more fitting for a team game, where you're playing with a whole squad. and you're going into a higher level because it nets you higher damage. But Nourish is better for playing her solo. Massive viral procs, deal a lot of damage, but again, Roar would be higher in that regard. I tested both extensively. And so Nourish also helps you with the energy because again, we spam spores a lot, right? To keep the infected number of enemies higher enough so it keeps scaling. Because again, most of the time you'll one-shot the entire room and all the enemies would just like vanish, so your stacks of spores would begin to decay, and that's not good. You know, spores are gonna lose damage and you're gonna have to scale them up again and all that. You don't really need. You're gonna be spamming it like you go into a room, you hit a spore, and then Sobek shot. Just you one shot the entire room, but still all the enemies were inflicted with spores. So there are enemies who are outside the room. You can't see them yet, or you can only see them on the map, but they already got spores on them. So for most of the time you'll find me just having like less than 10 enemies affected with spores because I was playing solo, so enemies spawn less obviously. But again, you will have the spores scaling to like 5,000 damage per tick, and they tick a lot, right? You get it to a point where it just shreds through enemies. And again, every tick procs corrosive, and we're going to be using 2 green Archon shards for the extra corrosive stacks so we can armor strip the enemy. And we're going to need Nourish for that and to keep our buffs refreshed all the time, and also for Molt to move around faster, to get those brief seconds of the enemies trying to target something else that's not us, right? And because we mentioned Archon shards, we have her Archon shard setup. We got 2 Emerald Archon shards. Regular ones, you don't need 16 corrosive procs, you only need 14. The normal max is 10, so you add 2 and 2, that's 14 full armor stripping the enemy with 14 hits of your corrosive, which also is going to be added to your weapon. Your Sobek is going to proc corrosive all the damn time, so you're not going to really be seeing any enemies with armor around. Basically, you just walk up to a group of enemies, just hit spore, a single shot of your Sobek, and everyone gets armor stripped and killed in an instant, right? And again, as the enemies who are in your field of view are getting taken away by your spores, when you see them, they've already lost all their armor. And you'll see that in the showcase part. Instead of using Archon shards that are like for strength to increase our buffs or anything, we're going to be using them for toxin status effect to deal extra damage. Here we have 45, 45, 45, which is 135 extra damage on our toxin status damage, which again we're going to be proccing a lot with our Toxic Lash and with our Sobek and a secret synergetic whip. So let's head first to Saryn's build. This probably is going to be a long video. So on Saryn, again, I'm using shield gating. So what I'm doing is I'm using Molt Augmented for strength, Blind Rage, got Precision Intensified to empower our Roar to get the highest possible damage increase and energy increase. We're going to be using Primed Flow for energy. Going to be using Archon Continuity for the duration, for the status duration, so our buffs don't need to be refreshed every 30 seconds. And then for our shield setup, we're going to be using Brief Respite with Primed Redirection and Fast Deflection, Vigilante Vigor, and Arcane Aegis. That will basically grant us 1,000 shields that keep refreshing all the time, and whenever Arcane Aegis stops refreshing, you just hit an ability, and Brief Respite and Blind Rage go hand in hand in making our abilities cost an extra amount of energy, and that amount of energy that we use is basically gonna be 150% of it is gonna be converted into shields, so we can sustain ourselves more, and our shields already begin recharging after 0.2 seconds, right? So we already have like a pretty solid shield regen build. So we're gonna be using her Venom Dose, as I said, to hold spores to buff our weapon with corrosive damage, which is gonna help us with armor stripping in one shot and dealing a ton of damage with specifically with something like the Sobek. I kinda hate how strong it is, but still I gotta admit that I fucking love it, right? So with that done, let's go and check on the Sobek build. So we got a Kuva Sobek, and we got it at 60% toxin, which is just perfect for Saryn. You're gonna go pure toxin on the Sobek, right? And so we're gonna start by Sobek specific mods. You're gonna need acid shells. That's the main reason we're using Sobek for her. That's the main way Sobek can nuke on her. And we're going to be using clip delegation to increase our multi-shot and our status chains to again proc as much status as possible. And again, with our Sobek being pure toxin, we're going to be using primary blight. For every time we deal toxin, it stacks critical damage and multi-shot for up to 40 stacks, which is going to make us deal huge amount of damage, right? And also, we're gonna be doing, because this is all basically based on our toxin procs, like this improves it, makes us proc more, this makes us use the more we proc, the more damage we deal. This one makes enemies explode and spread all that damage around. But also, this mod, Shotgun Elementalist, it pairs well with Saryn's Toxic Lash, because it basically, Toxic Lash counts as a second shot from your weapon, so this is going to increase the damage that our toxin does, so that's a 90% above the 135% that we have from the Archon shards already. So this is going to be crazy. And so we use Prime Point Blank for the extra damage, Prime Ravage for critical damage, Crit Deceleration for extra critical chance, sets us at 63%, which is not that good in terms of like high crit chance and stuff, but it's good enough that we are gonna still deal a load of damage, because again, our multi-shot will get super high. Like, I think when I calculated it was about 20 something pellets, and again, we're gonna be stacking critical damage here, right? And so we're gonna be using Galvanized Savvy to increase the damage per status type affecting the enemy, which also makes us deal a lot of damage to enemies that are primed by our companion. If you haven't seen my video on the companion, it's the Lavos Part 2 video where I explain how I use my Cedo and how my companion is just great. You gotta see it for yourselves. I'm using a hound that I got from a random sister that I killed. Again, I can't stress enough how good it is and how stupid powerful it is. It primes enemies with 10 elements, and yeah, it's something. Alright, so here we're using Vigilante supplies on the Exilus slot, because I'm already using one Vigilante mod on Saryn herself. So I'm using this one here to boost the chance of my weapon getting a higher tier of crit every now and then. Not that big of a deal really, but it makes big numbers, and big numbers make my brain give me the happy juice. So I don't know how to explain it, but it's just funny as shit. That's all I'm gonna say. Now we go to our second Sobek that we have. It's not in the primary slot, it's not something like the Ogress or anything. It's a melee, it's a whip. And so here I'm using Spinnerex, which is Araxia's whip.
Hey Dad, that's a cool whip.
Which is really strange that it released with Araxia, but it was, at least in my opinion, made for Saryn, right? So what we're using is, we'll go with Coiling Viper, Discipline's Merit for heavy attacks, Because again, heavy attacks on this stance would force a knockdown, and so with that we use melee afflictions to increase the amount of status by 6 when we knock the enemies down. And again, we're using Toxic Clash that deals double damage on the melee weapon, right? And bear with me, it's not done yet. So we'll go with Killing Blow to boost our heavy attack. We don't even need that Riven. It's just I just added it for the extra range, but I don't really need it. I can replace it with whatever you feel comfortable using. Alright, but I don't feel like replacing it with Galvanized Reflex because we already have ways to sustain our combo without needing that or needing Naramon. Again, Discipline's Merit, a free heavy attack every four regular attacks, which also her regular attacks, the whip's regular attacks also fling enemies around, so you keep getting that consistent melee afflictions proc. And so what we do is it deals pure toxin damage, so we use Weeping Wounds, Galvanized Elementalist for extra status chance and the status damage. And then we use Prime Fever Strike for extra toxin, and then Prime Pressure Point. You can replace that with Condition Overload, but I prefer Pressure Point because enemies don't last long enough for them to be primed before I attack them, so Condition Overload is really kind of counterintuitive for me. And also Prime Breach, and also I'm using Virulent Scourge. As you can see, I'm putting a ton of toxic damage all over the place because again, we're gonna be using Toxin. And the big part about this weapon is the unique trait, which is just crazy. So for every stack of toxin on the enemy, there is a 10% chance that they will blow up, dealing toxic damage to all the enemies around, right? And so with 10 stacks of toxin, we basically guarantee the explosion, which is kind of giving an acid shells vibe. And so that's why we have so much status chance on our weapon. We have melee afflictions to increase the procs even more, and with all that, we also have our Toxic Lash. Okay, so this is the only weapon I'm gonna showcase in this section. You already saw it in the gameplay section, but still, it's just too crazy. So what we do is we go in, have a bunch of heavy gunners, use spores, and then we start whipping them, and everybody just blows up just like that. We didn't even stack any combo yet. It's just that crazy. So this is how I use Saryn. This is how I nuke everything. Doesn't matter if it's with a Sobek, without a Sobek, she still can kill everything. She's super strong, but again, a little bit squishy on that, but still a dead enemy can't really shoot at me. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and we'd be happy to have you join our Discord server. We're about 150 people now. I didn't expect it to get that much, and we host giveaways every now and then, so make sure to keep an eye out for that if you want to join, and we'll be happy to have you. This is it for this video. Have a good day or night, depending on whatever you're watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one, hopefully soon.